Good evening, everyone. I'm Lee Reed, Executive Director of the Atlanta Citizen Review Board. Tonight is Tuesday Night's Talks. I'm happy to be on here tonight to be able to talk with you about issues involving police accountability. The Atlanta Citizen Review Board, for those who first time looking at this, the Atlanta Citizen Review Board is an independent investigative agency of the city of Atlanta that's charged with investigating, mediating, receiving, investigating, mediating, and adjudicating complaints against Atlanta police and corrections officers. Um, our primary focus is addressing your concerns about the actions of Atlanta police and corrections officers. We do that through our investigations. We do that through our mediation program, and then there's another part of our organization, our agency, that is focused on building community awareness of the agency and educating the community about their rights and responsibilities as it relates to interactions with police officers. We encourage you, if you have a concern or complaint about the actions of a police officer, call us 404-865-8622 or contact us via our website, acrbgov.org. With me tonight, I have Melissa Jane Baptiste, who is our communications specialist.
Hi, Lee.
Yes,
How are you tonight?
I'm well. I'm well. Thank you. And we're going to engage in this conversation about excessive force. And as I understand it, we have an incident that occurred a few days ago, or maybe last week, out of Miami. So, Melissa, what was the deal with that?
So, we're going to look into this article over here that was published by the Miami Herald on August 2nd. So, last week, five Miami Beach officers were hit with criminal charges on Monday for using excessive force on a man who was already handcuffed and plummeted to the ground. A bystander who was also recording the incident also got hit in that altercation. The officers were charged with single counts of misdemeanor battery. The five police officers turned themselves in at Miami Beach Police Headquarters earlier in the day, and their names are Sergeant Jose Perez, Officer Kevin Perez, Robert Sabater, and Stephen Serrano and David Rivas. So it brings to light a few different things that we wanted to touch on today in regards to the topic. And being that we have you today, Lee, we wanted to see what you would say and what actions maybe we could have had that would have prevented this accident to happen a week ago in Miami. So when we are looking at an issue like this where someone is already detained, what are some possible next steps the police department can take or should take when officers continue to respond with excessive force even after the person is detained? Because we've seen this over and over again. I think on our last Tuesday talk, we discussed Miss Ashley Cooley of Atlanta, Georgia, who had the exact same issue happen, kicked in the head as she was detained. What do you think are some steps that the police should take, the police department should take on these officers, because these are becoming more and more current events?
Well, I watched that video and it's definitely disturbing. And I'm glad that Miami uh, fired those officers. I think they fired those officers.
They're
And
currently being charged with battery, but it
yeah,
is a misdemeanor.
okay. And, that they're being charged because, you know, their actions were totally, just from my first view of it,
Yes,
were totally uncalled for.
right.
So when we talk about what can the police departments do? Well, the first thing is they have to institute a culture of accountability
Right.
up and down the line. One of those officers was a sergeant in a leadership role. What Instead of maintaining control and taking charge of the situation, he's contributing to it. One, two. When we talk about this culture of accountability, what we're talking about is that when officers understand that they will be held accountable for their actions immediately, swiftly, and have to answer for the actions that they take out on the street with regards to citizens. But some departments have put in place policies like duty to intervene, where officer who's on the scene witnessing another officer take actions, they have a policy that they're supposed to intervene and stop it. But here's the thing about that. Unless those officers believe that they're going to be supported by their police department, by their chain of command, they're not going to do anything.
Right.
Unless they believe that they're going to be held accountable for not intervening, they're not going to do anything. What we saw in that video was a group, almost a mob of officers,
like a herd,
descend on this individual who, from what I saw in the video, once the gun was drawn as he was coming out the elevator, he got down on the ground, put his hands behind his back. Two officers came up to him and looked like they were starting to handcuff him.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, a swarm of other officers start coming around, so you can't really see what's happening. But it appears that once those other officers start swarming around, and some were sliding into the group, some were just running in and kicking and pulling, that it seemed like it was definitely excessive and that it wasn't called for, but that goes to the culture. And then if you're watching the video, you can see some of the officers milling around, standing around, not really paying too much attention, which gives me the idea that, oh, this is an acceptable practice.
Right.
Nobody's looking like shocked, and nobody's saying, hey man, get up, move back off, any of that kind of stuff. Like, well, this is what we do. And that's a result of the culture of permissiveness when it comes to officers using that type of force on an individual.
And it's hard to say, even though we have some of those laws that are implemented in place, that if an officer sees another officer engaging in some type of, brutal force, that they should intervene, because they have that blue wall and, they're there to protect each other. So usually you see them go in the direction that they did just now, where one officer came in and then they all swarmed in, versus taking that opposing action to the other officers that were doing that, like excessive crime.
Here's the thing. Your duty is not to the fellow officers. Your duty is to enforcing the laws,
right,
and adhering to your policies, and representing the department, right? So when we talk about accountability, that's something that needs to be stressed. That if your partner or your fellow officers are doing something that's in contrast to the policies, to what the department stands for, your duty is to address the situation.
right.
But again, that goes back to how comfortable are the officers to engage in that type of activity, and how comfortable and supported are the officers to prevent and stop that type of activity. And one of the ways that you address the culture is that you have to, as they did, they acted on it. But see, it's the culture that let it get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, them acting on it is a way of trying to, dial back that type of culture, but that's going to take some time, and it's going to take consistent enforcement. Thank goodness that the video shows what happened.
What really happened.
You know what I mean? Because absent the video, the only story we'll have is what the police officers are saying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, mind you, the video, the bodies, the swarm of bodies around the individual blocks some of the activity. So I'm sure they're going to try to use that as a way of saying, well, you couldn't see everything that was happening, what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And they will need to be able to address why you have 10, 15 officers behaving the way that they're behaving. Now they address 5 of those officers, but through the administrative process, all of those officers need to be accountable for their actions and inaction during that incident.
Right, because it was definitely more than 5 officers there.
Right.
And being that you spoke about the video, that leads us to our next question. So even in this situation, the bystander who was recording the video actually was also plummeted by the police officer and charged subsequently that day. But later on, the charges were dropped, of course, once the story began to unfold and the footage that he had in his possession was actually viewed by the police department. So our next question for you is, with this case and looking back at the George Floyd case where his entire situation and death was recorded for the full 9 minutes, we know how important video be. So how should civilian bystanders handle recording police brutality or misconduct?
That's a good question, Melissa. I mean, you know, I have some thoughts and ideas about this, and they're out there in the sphere on the internet addressing some of these same concerns. First and foremost is your safety as the bystander recorder. You know, first, do not physically interfere with the officers. Try not to become a part of the action. You know, you want to be able to keep your phone stable in a position that makes it obvious that you are recording and not a potential threat to the officers.
Right.
You know, and in certain situations, like in this one, you can see the location. Well, you can see it was in a building, but in some situations, you know, you want to be able to state that, you know, the date, time, location of the recorder, pan the camera around the area so it can document landmarks and location. That's especially important when we're talking about on the city streets. You know, a park, a recording of something happening in a park um, could be any park. So you want to be able to document that. Um, and if you're able to comment on what you're witnessing, do that. You know, but just keep your comments to a minimum so that we can hear what's happening in the police action. You know, number of officers, the officers' actions, you know, to provide the context of the recording, with weapons being used. Again, remaining recording from a safe distance.
Being clear of
And,
the
and and then when you have these situations where the officers are, I don't know, we don't know what they said to the citizen who was recording, but you have a right to record. You don't have a right to interfere, but you have a right to record, you know, and uh and you have to let the officers know that you're recording, you have a right to record. If they want you to stop recording, ask them why. Let them know you had that right. If they ask for your device, for your recording device, you don't have to give it over. Now, if they take it from you, that's different. And I would not suggest, and I do not suggest fighting them to keep it, but you explain to them that you have the right to record and that you don't want to give up your device. You're not a part of the action. I would also suggest recording to the cloud if you're able to. That way, if they take possession of your phone and your phone has not been locked, that they won't be able to, even if they were able to erase it, they would not be able to totally destroy the recording because it's in the cloud. And that brings up when I was talking about locking the phone, that if you set your phone for automatic lock when you're not using it, that'll make it harder for them to get into it. So,
right.
you know, and if officer asks you to move back from the situation, comply, move back, but keep recording. And in all situations where you think that the officer or believe that the officer is trying to interfere with your right to record or confiscates your phone or deletes your recording, file a complaint. You can file a complaint with your civilian oversight agency here in Atlanta. It's our agency, the ACRB, or you can file it with the with the with the police department, because they have to be held accountable when they violate that right to record. So
Okay.
those are some of my thoughts as it relates to the recordings. I think that you know
With this
um,
situation, what would be like the main takeaways? I definitely see that they are charged. You know, they are charged with that single count of misdemeanor battery. I'm not really sure if that really suffice, because it seems so unwarranted how, you know, they all just swarmed upon him at the moment. I understand he did somewhat flee a scene, but he was definitely complying. So it's something for us to really like look into and see how that goes with those officers. But do you have any takeaways in regards to just this story in Miami Beach and how this is becoming a continuous thing where people are under arrest and still having excessive force used on them?
Just like everything, we have to continue to put this before the public so that the public is aware of what's happening, and continue to press that the police department hold officers accountable. They have to bring in a serious effort and demand that officer accountability happens. You know, when I was looking at the video, and it's maybe like 2.5 minutes into the video where you already have a group of officers already on this individual. You have another officer sliding in across the floor to get into it. You know, and I mean, he needs to get disciplined. Why? What was the purpose?
Right.
You know, and then when you look at the according to the news reports, what they have said, that he was, you know, on an illegally parked scooter, tried to get away, ran into one of the officers, almost hit another officer, and then he ran into hotel lobby.
With the palm, yes.
Okay, well, one could argue the threat of the use of the scooter, that's over with now. You know, now the next question somebody might want to say, well, maybe he had a weapon. Well, we don't know that, right?
Nothing
It
was
didn't appear in the video when he was coming out of the elevator and put his hands behind his back, that he didn't have a weapon that was accessible to him, that was in his hands. You know, now, and it also goes to this: when you have multiple people hitting you or on you, your body naturally moves. You know, tenses up, moves, or whatever. You know what I mean? Is that trying to fight back? No, that's your body going through its natural reactions.
Right.
Again, I say when the two officers were on him, he seemed to be under control. You know, and if you know, and here's the question: um, how many officers realistically does it take to arrest someone? Now, of course, that's dependent on the suspect and how hard the suspect is fighting back, right?
Right.
In this situation here, I don't know. And that's where, and I'm going to say this, that's where independent investigations are important, you know, because um, I would bet that out of all those officers there, they're going to say, oh, he was putting up a fight. He was trying to grab somebody's gun. He was, you know, doing all of these different things.
And the video evidence does not show that.
Right. And their reports need to be able to articulate each action that they took. You know, and while the charges, and this is the other importance of filing with the independent investigative agency or with the internal affairs, is that while the criminal prosecution is looking at whether some criminal charges have been violated, I mean, criminal laws have been violated, and they're using the beyond a reasonable doubt standard as trying to determine if they're going to be able to prosecute a case, you know, to determine what type of charges, how forceful those charges should be. The administrative investigations, independent investigations like we do, the internal affairs, we're looking at, did they violate the policies, which is a lower standard. And that's where you can get a lot of these officers and get them addressed.
And it is really with all cases popping up all over the country. It's really showing the importance of the oversight of an oversight board or some type of community policing that is required, because it's something that isn't just needed within our community policing, and the misuse and the conduct that the misconduct that's going on is going on everywhere. And we really do see a need, especially in this time, for some type of civilian oversight. I know the city of Miami does have some type and some form of it. I really do hope that they look into this case, because it's from the 4-minute video that we've seen, there's no justification as to why those officers reacted the way that they did. But moving on with the segment for today, we also have a few questions from our chat line. So on our website, you have the opportunity to ask us any questions. You could also give us a call and email us. And today we have about 3 questions for you here, Lee. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. Our first question kind of falls in line with our last topic from James. If I get pulled over or stopped by the police, can I legally record them with my phone without them telling me I cannot do it?
The simple answer is, the quick answer is yes. The APD policy prohibits officers from interfering, stopping citizens from recording their actions. The exception would be if you are physically interfering with the officers. Otherwise, the officers cannot interfere or stop you from recording their actions. With that, officers cannot delete your recordings of their actions.
Like that, yeah.
That's in the APD policy to address those issues. So if you ever have a concern, or an officer says, stop recording me, or I don't want you to record me, file a complaint.
From there, being told at all that you cannot record them, you already are in grounds where you can file a complaint on that.
That's right.
Because
that's right.
You should not be told that. Perfect.
That's right.
Okay. Our next question comes from Miss Hannah. She asked, can an off-duty officer listen through your bedroom window without announcing themselves as an officer? It's very specific.
Well, first, if they're off duty and not there, I'm going to address it 2 ways. First, if they're off duty and not there in a law enforcement capacity, they're trespassing on your land, right? And that's breaking the law right there.
Right.
So no, they can't do that, right? Now, let's say that they're on the land and now they want to try to use it in some law enforcement capacity, right?
Right.
Well, they're violating your 4th Amendment rights, because the curtilage or the surroundings of your house, you have an expectation for privacy as it relates to that area, right? So they would need to have a warrant to be on your property listening to your conversations, okay? If you have a concern about that, again, file a complaint.
So that's pretty clear there. If they are acting as an off-duty officer, they definitely cannot. And if they are on your property as an officer, if they do not have the proper warrants, they should not be there as well. So, and I really hope, Hannah, I hope that helps you and answers your question. Our last question comes from Kimberly.
And Melissa, let me just say one thing.
Oh,
acting as an off-duty officer means you're a citizen.
You're a civilian.
Right.
All right.
Just like your neighbor can't be up on your property listening to your conversations, an off-duty officer, civilian, cannot be doing that.
Right.
They're trespassing.
When you clock out, you are and I think that's something that we identify with a lot of certain things. Like, I'm a rattler. I went to FAMU, so I identify as a rattler. And there's a lot of different things as far as our careers, and people just identify as that, and they take that as their identity. But we always want to remember that an officer is an officer while he's on duty. It is his job, but he does not have any special privileges in or out of that uniform, especially out of that uniform. He becomes a regular man, a regular person, and they get no special privileges.
Right.
So sometimes we do feel intimidated just by knowing that a guy is a cop and they're not even on duty. There's nothing to be worried about. Okay. Our last question comes from Kimberly, and she wants to know how she makes a complaint on cops. And I may butcher this city name. Is it Luigi City, Georgia? It's Ludowicii.
Yeah, Ludowicii, Georgia, something like that. Yes. You know, the wiki doesn't have a civilian oversight agency, but I would tell Kimberly that she should definitely contact the Internal Affairs Unit of the, and I'm not even sure if they have the city of Ludowicii has a police force. I think the county does the police enforcement there.
Okay.
And that county would be Long County Sheriff's Department. So she would want to file a complaint with them. And if they don't have an internal affairs unit, which they should, there should be someone, supervisor, the chief, or chief investigator, someone who handles internal affairs types of complaints, citizen complaints, that contact that office and lodge your complaint with them. And I would say this, and well, this is what I'm saying. Depending on the nature of the complaint, I recommend that you contact the local NAACP, a lawyer, church, and depending on the incident, FBI and the news media. Also, I'll file a complaint with the local elected officials and the city council, city or county attorney's office. The whole idea is you want to make sure that your concern doesn't get pushed to the side, doesn't get ignored, and you want to make sure it gets out there in the environment so that one, other people know about it. Two, it cannot be ignored. Three, you have support of someone to help you push that complaint through. And four, that you're expecting a response. You're expecting an action.
Right.
You know, a part of this, how do we help police hold themselves accountable, is by filing complaints with them, getting it on paper, demanding a response. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, and making sure we have some type of documentation of the action and what happened, the incident.
Exactly. People, we were talking earlier about accountability. People avoid accountability when they're not told on. If only you and I know about what's happening between us, right, I don't have to worry about being accountable. Mm-hmm. Right? So I do what I want to do. Right. But the moment you start telling someone else about what's happening, okay, now I got to think about it for a minute. And then if you're telling someone else who has the authority to hold me accountable, now I really need to adjust my attitude, adjust my actions. So we don't do anybody any favors by not telling on officers who need to be corrected. We're not serving we in our individual citizen capacity are not serving ourselves. We're not serving the community, and we're not serving the police department. We must say something.
Thank you so much for that, Lee. And those are the questions that we have from the chat line. It looks like that's also our time for this segment of Tuesday Talks. You want to go ahead and close it out for us, Lee?
Yes. Thank you again, Melissa, for creating this forum for us to be able to talk to the community about their questions. I encourage you, if you have a question for us or would like to file a complaint, please send us a chat message on our website, acrbgov.org, or give us a call at 404-865-8622. And definitely use our social media to follow us, to connect with us, and let us know what's on your mind.
I'm
Lee Reed.
And just making sure we're always open and letting everyone know that we want to hear your concerns and how everyone's feeling about what we're doing in the community of Atlanta.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I'm Lee Reed, and we'll talk again 6 o'clock on the next Tuesday night talks. Thank
Thank
you all for tuning in, and we hope to hear from you soon.
y'all. Have a good night.
Good night.